Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Daugherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hello, and welcome back to the Grief Ladies podcast. I am Karyn here with Kelly, and we are working through our framework this holiday season. We have come to the letter R for rebuilding. Kelly, you want to tell us a little bit about that and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So our grief framework is based on the word grief, grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. And because we believe there are actionable steps to be able to help you on your grief journey. So today's episode is focusing on the trail marker of rebuilding. And what that really means is looking at our routines and looking at how grief is impacting our lives and making maybe even small little changes to our routine, giving ourselves some structure so we can be able to deal with our grief, because grief can feel really overwhelming and exhausting. And sometimes we need a little bit of routine to be added in to be able to help us navigate this grief journey.
Yeah. And so, for people listening, you're going to maybe be in different parts of your grief journey. So if this is very new, this loss, you may be still trying to figure out what your routine is. You may not really know. I find, especially for anybody who is a caregiver, if you lost the person that you shared living space with and kind of your plans and your routine, there can be these big voids and not really knowing how to spend your day and what to do. So you may already be in the process of kind of questioning some of this. Then there will be some maybe who are a little bit further along. Maybe they have started to incorporate some things again. There's maybe a little bit of structure. And then the holidays are coming. And maybe there's going to be some traveling or people visiting or events. And that can bring its own set of issues and challenges that can come up with it. So we're going to be kind of looking at all of that.
Yeah, so we're really focusing today on how do we handle when the holidays completely throw off our normal routine. And like Karyn said, it might be traveling, it might be family in town, it could be more social engagements, it could be more time off from work, which, sometimes is when I know my grieving clients struggle the most, when that non structured time, like the weekends or the nights, we might have more of those. And how do we manage that and navigate that this holiday season?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like we'll often say, I think it's really important to be recognizing that, to be mindful of the impact. I think so often things are happening and it's like, we're feeling really restless or agitated or irritable, frustrated, and we can't quite say why that is or what it may be. So we want to recognize like, okay, this is probably part of it. There's so much out there about the holidays. Um, we just are seeing decorations and maybe hearing songs on the radio, and it feels like things are starting earlier and earlier. So there's just like a longer time to be feeling all of this too. So I think one thing first is to figure out sort of what category you will that you fit in. Are you still trying to navigate your routine? Or are you someone who has one that's pretty well set that maybe you're trying to protect? So, if you're someone who is at the earlier stages of this and you haven't quite figured out your routine, I think one thing to recognize is that this is still a time that you can do that. That doesn't have to stop just because it's the holidays. Because we can have a tendency, like, listen, I know, for example, if I know I'm going on vacation in like 2 weeks, I'll start eating bad now. Because I'm like, well, I know I'm not going to be able to food shop then anyway. And I know, I start to like kind of set up these reasons why I'm just going to kind of let it go and I'll just worry about it after or whatever. But we can start right regardless of where we're going, yes, we can fit those things in. But as Kelly and I often talk about, this holidays is this very big period of time, this term that we use for 3 months, basically, when again, we may be talking about a week, couple of days here and there, the holidays themselves, a party, a visit here and there. We are not talking about 3 months of time. So don't put off working on your structure and routine if that is something you're still trying to establish. You probably need it now more than ever. So, like, if someone is right now trying to figure out their routine, holidays or not, Kelly, what's like a good thing that you would suggest a person do for that?
I think it's really kind of building off of the grounding that we talked about, right, in our initial trial marker. And the grounding comes back to the basics, right? The sleep, the eating, and the movement. And so it's about trying to look at your schedule, look at your routine, and make sure that you're building that in, right? Having a good sleep schedule, making sure you try to go to bed. And obviously, the holidays can disrupt that. I get that, right? Like I, I'll be honest, I'm usually in bed by 7:30 at night. And like I'm thinking like, "Oh gosh, I have that dinner event. I'm going to have to, I have a book event. I have all these things that I'm like, oh, I'm going to be, like I'm dreading some of that already because I know it's going to throw me off of my routine. And when I'm off of my routine, then I'm more tired the next day. And then it's like a snowball effect, right? So, I think maybe I need to go to bed a little later, start doing that now so I can be prepared. But, even right now, what we're dealing with is we're recording this a few days after the time change. And I was talking with a friend this morning, and she's an early riser like I am. And she's like, I'm now awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, yep, me too, because our bodies are
Mm.
used to that. So she's changed her routine a little bit. She's going to a 5 a.m. gym class instead of a 6 a.m. gym class. So, but we do need to kind of go back to the basics. I think that as far as like, okay, what does our sleep look like? Making that part of our routine, making sure that you're eating, you're moving your body. Does that mean that you have to kind of have these things scheduled on your calendar? So kind of they can keep you accountable. So I think it's about also looking at small things. I love lists. I love lists. I have tons of lists right next to me. I love crossing things off of my list, but sometimes that can feel really overwhelming. So maybe breaking those lists down into smaller things that you know that you need to accomplish, and you can kind of build that into your routine. Like maybe it's Christmas shopping. I make usually family calendars every Christmas. That's what one of the things that I've done for years. And so thinking about, okay, how can I structure that into my routine? When am I going to do that? And so you can feel like you have a little bit of control over this time of the year. Like, okay, I'm going to do shopping this time. And maybe this year, for just this year, you don't go to any stores. Maybe you do all your shopping online or whatever that looks like. So I think it's about making things more manageable steps for you, but building it into your routine. Like I have a calendar that because I have a lot going on right now, and I had to print it out and write all the different things down. So even my husband knows what I'm doing because I don't think he is aware.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I think that that's good. Definitely writing things down, trying to organize some things rather than just have it kind of rattling around in
Mhm.
our head. There may be people that are still very much having to make the phone calls, like to the credit card companies and doing those kinds of tasks. So in those very early days, there's still a lot of the business side of the grieving things to do. That's kind of weird and out of place sometimes with maybe what some of your holiday chores may be. So I think wanting to try to fit in maybe one or two things a day to kind of keep your momentum going. And we don't want to get to January and feel like, oh my gosh, I have so much catching up to do. This is kind of what we talked about before, like the short term versus the long term. Like right now, it can feel good to maybe put a few things off, but then we're only creating some challenges for ourselves later. So we want to try to, as our energy and our motivation allow, but try to do ourselves a favor and stay on top of a few things. But I really like to encourage people to do kind of like that work and reward. So if you do something, whatever it may be, like the phone call or if it's shopping, whether it's holiday related or not, make sure you're also building in some rest time for after. Making these little pockets of the day where you are able to feel accomplished, because what's really important is that the more we get done, the better we feel about ourselves. So there's a really good reason why we want to stay on top of some of this so that we can again kind of stick with that momentum, or start a momentum hopefully, and that we can feel good about ourselves. Doesn't feel great if we are giving ourselves a break here and there, taking a day or two. That's absolutely necessary, maybe even especially right now, but people crave structure. I mean, anybody who has been a kid in the summer or had kids in the summer knows what that end of summertime starts to look like when nobody knows what day it is, what they're having for dinner. Everything is just all kind of loosey goosey, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, we need to get back to school." And it's because it creates a sense of structure. Like no matter what place our life we're in or how old we are, we still really do better with structure than without.
Yeah, absolutely. Structure and routine we thrive in. We don't,
Mhm.
and we think we always talk about kids, but I do believe that we do as well. And I really liked what you said is one or two things, right? I have a friend of mine that's a new widow, and she'll be like, I can do one thing a day off of this list, and that's it. And it is a
Mm.
lot that she has to do. And but I love when she comes in and she's like, I did this. I went to the DMV today. Like she kind of celebrates it with me, and we're able to be like, you did it, you got through it, like, oh, it wasn't as bad as you thought, or hey, it sucked but I did it anyway. And so maybe it even having somebody to reach out to and to check in with when you've done those things, like I said, like crossing those things off the list feels great, but also being able to like share it with somebody and being like, I did it, like this is some hard stuff. And you might want to also look at if you are in that early place of going through the checklist of all the people you need to contact, all the things you need to do. Try to be mindful that we're also coming up on the year end. So, what do you need to prioritize? Maybe for taxes down, in next year. Like, I hate to even have to bring that up. And I hate that grieving people even have to file taxes for their loved ones that have died, but it is a reality. And so maybe thinking about like, oh, this is something that I should definitely get done this calendar year. And then think about maybe what are the things that you can put off until January.
Mhm.
And then, and make yourself that little list. I listened to a podcast many years ago and I don't know who it was, but it kind of talked about like a win list. Like, what are the 5 things you need to accomplish that day? And then you cross them off. And if you get them all done, you give yourself a big W, a big win for the day. And I really loved that because sometimes these to-do lists can feel so overwhelming. And so if we can just think about what are the things we have to do and what are the things maybe we want to do? Like you said, a reward, maybe giving yourself that reward of something that you can enjoy doing after you've done it.
Are you ready to take the next step on your grief journey with real tools and compassionate guidance? The Grief Ladies are launching a brand new workshop series based on their signature grief GRIEF framework. 5 trail markers to help you find your footing after your loss: grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. Each workshop focuses on one trail marker, guiding you through practical steps to move from surviving to living again, all in a space that's honest, supportive, and real. Led by grief experts Kelly Daugherty and Karyn Arnold, these workshops combine decades of experience with tools you can start using today. Visit griefladies.com to explore the upcoming workshops because you don't have to climb this mountain alone.
Yeah. And we were kind of talking about the 2 categories, and so, for the people who are newer and still trying to establish the routine, again, encouraging people to stick with that and still make that a priority. I find, like, for the other group, maybe people who are a little bit further along, that it's the disruption because so this is interesting to me. I've had this come up a lot with people. I work with a lot of people who've lost their spouse. And so a person in that situation or someone lost their, shared living space with, so maybe a parent that they were a caregiver for. And so it's a really huge adjustment to go from living with someone to living on your own. It's an adjustment that's constantly happening and people are readjusting to. But if they do get to that point where they've adapted a bit and they have settled in a little bit to a routine, and then I find their own space becomes very important and very sacred to them. And having that time for quiet, having that time for grief, having that time to not have to be on becomes really, really important. So it's just this weird thing that here we're talking about this group that hasn't established it yet. And then the group that has may find the holidays really interfere with some of the quiet and solitude they actually now need. So it'd be like, oh, wonderful. The kids are coming to visit, and I'm looking forward to that, I think. And then, but wait a minute, I cry every morning. Like, what am I going to do when they're here, or I'm going to visit someplace else? And part of my ritual is having my husband's picture that I say goodnight to every night. And it's our big anniversary picture on our wall. So I can't bring it with me. Like, so these are all the things that maybe we've put in place for like connections. And now they're going to be disrupted. So recognizing that that may be part of what you're feeling challenged by, and knowing that if you are entertaining or if you are traveling, that you are going to still need to prioritize your grief time with other people around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's those are some big things to think about, and I think it's about having that awareness and being mindful that before this happens, so you're not in the midst of it and you're like, "Oh crap," like, "What how do I handle this now?" So trying to have a bit of a plan for yourself. I think that's really for the holidays, that's some of the biggest things that I talk with all of my clients about is having a plan in place
Hmm.
for your self-care, for how you're gonna navigate certain things, like thinking about what you're going to may change, just because your normal routine, like with the spouse was to go to this party. You may say this year, I'm not going to go to that party because it could be too triggering. Maybe it's all couples and it's these people and you don't want to feel like the fifth wheel this year or you're just not up for it this year. And so I think we also need to remember to give yourself permission that sometimes it's okay to skip things this year or to say no to things. As I always say, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to give a reason why, but thinking about what feels good for you, looking at your routine, what do you want to do and what don't you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And building in, like, let's say there's things you just feel like you can't avoid or that you can't get out of, making sure that it's almost immediately or as soon as possible followed up with something that's for you, that you do want to do. So if, we're always kind of encouraging people to, especially maybe like for that first year, you get, to decide if you want to spend it alone or with people, or if you want to host or don't want to host. Um, and if we're fortunate enough to actually be able to make that decision, great. But some people don't feel that they can. So we want to make sure that we're putting something into place that you would want to do. Because if you say to people like, "What would you want to do?" I wish I could just lay in my pajamas all day. Okay, well then make sure there's a pajama day built in somewhere through this time. It may not be on the day that you would want it or you feel like you need it, but if it can be very soon after, that could still be pretty beneficial to you for sure.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about flexibility and
Hmm.
being practicing some self-compassion. You may say yes to a social thing or an event or doing something and then the time might come and you'd be like, I can't do it. And
Yeah,
that's okay. It's
yeah,
okay to change your mind, and it's okay to be flexible with yourself as you're navigating this. Obviously, we are talking about like routines, and sometimes having that routine gives us a little bit of sense of control over things, especially when things feel so out of control. But it's also okay sometimes to be like, I just can't do it today
yeah.
and
Do
to
you think
change it.
part of this, Kelly, maybe this moves a little bit as the framework does and moves through different things because they're all connected. I think sometimes what's hard about this is still feeling like a good person, feeling like a good sister or a good friend. We want to be identifying in that way. We're already struggling with our identity through a lot of this. So, as much as we can give people permission to take care of themselves, I mean, I think recognizing sometimes that's what makes it so hard is that, I'm already feeling so low. I'm not feeling that great about myself. And then saying no to someone who is asking me can feel tough. So, I mean, for me, when I talk to people about that, I talk to the temporary nature of these needs and that recognizing that there is a bit of self preservation that needs to happen in the short term, that we can go back to, being mindful of like, ah, this is really important to this other person. So sure, I'll go. But if you can't do that right now, it's that right now part of it as well.
Yes.
That's just really important.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example. So last year, after my dad died, I always adopt a family for Christmas. It is something
Oh,
that
that's
I've
nice.
done for years. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the shopping. I've been doing it with one of my good friends for several years with a local nonprofit. And sometimes we make a shopping day out of it. Last year, I was like, I can't do this. And
Mm.
she's also dealing with her own anticipatory grief. So she's like, I can't either. And so we had to make the decision together, like, for right now, for this year, we can't do it.
Mhm.
And not beat ourselves up. But I knew, like, I didn't have it in me to do all of that. Like, I always go way overboard anyway. Like, and it was just timing wise, like, I
Yeah.
just couldn't. And she didn't feel she had the energy to do it either. And so I think it was actually really good of us that we were able to recognize that, and as much as I would have loved to have been able to, like, I made a donation instead. Like, that
Yeah.
was rather than doing the whole shopping and all of that, like, I found a way to still feel like I was doing something good and but not beat myself up too much for not going doing what I normally did.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, it's such a perfect example. And you're still there's ways that maybe we can participate that don't feel like too much of a disconnect. Maybe if somebody invites us to something and then we just really don't feel up to attending, but maybe we send some flowers and a thank you for understanding, and I'll look forward to hope to see you next year or something. I mean, there's just lots of different ways to do it, especially if we feel like we want to preserve that sense of who we are, and we're someone who's always been very thoughtful and caring, and it doesn't feel very comfortable to be prioritizing ourselves. So I just really want people to understand, like, just understand it's just for right now. This isn't like a full-time personality change. This isn't, it's grief. It's the holidays. I mean, talk about, like, and for some people we know it could be the anniversary, or there could be birthdays happening. Like, this is that survival time that you
Yeah.
just maybe have to do what you have to do to get through it.
And I know we're talking about for people who are early in grief, but we also know every holiday feels different. And so I want to recognize that for people who are maybe further out.
Hmm.
You know, um, some years just bring up more than others. Sometimes it's because of another loss. Sometimes it's because of what's going on in our life. Sometimes it's because of the number of years it's been or whatever it is. Sometimes we can be like, wow, did I just go backwards? Like, why am I having such a hard time this holiday season again? And just recognize that's okay. Like, to be compassionate with yourself and kind with yourself. Like, you may be like, I was back into it. I was back to doing all the things. And this year I don't feel like doing it. And that's okay as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we do always want to recognize that, um, where you are in this process. And, it's not the timelines that matter. So it's not to say, oh, if it's this year or this year, you'll know the times you're struggling and when you're not. And they may be a surprise to you, especially if you are a little bit further along and things had felt okay. Sometimes people say that, they have their first year and they kind of get through it. And then it comes time for their second year and they feel less numb, more aware. They're kind of out of the fog and really seeing and feeling things a little bit more intensely. So, that's the other piece of it too, that it may be that there were things you could do last year, or that ways you weren't really feeling disrupted that now that you are. So, like, better not to question, like, why is this happening? It is. Okay. So where do we go from here? What can we do about that? And I think, Kelly, that's what we're often trying to talk about is, like, what are some of the action things? What are some of the things that you can do to help with that?
Yeah. So, based on exact great segue, Karen, let's
Oh, I knew what I was doing.
what is our actionable step for our listeners this week on the rebuilding trail marker?
Okay. Well, this is either like a pen and paper moment, or just to think about, but three things that maybe are part of your day right now, things that are giving you some structure. And, just thinking about one or circling one that feels realistic to keep. We don't want to be getting completely away from all of our routines. So even, we've been kind of like encouraging you to stick with some routines, or to be building routines, not to let the holidays completely take over, but let's make something non-negotiable. Maybe especially if it's something that really feels like a connection to your loved one. I've had people that have a morning ritual with, like, reading the newspaper, having a cup of coffee or something like that. That's part of their routine and part of their connection with their loved one. That'd be a great thing to make sure that you're keeping, because it also can help you keep connected through your grief. So let's say you are going to visit someone. Maybe you still say, listen, I'm going to need a little time in the morning. I'll be ready to go by like 9, but I just like to have that little bit of time in the morning for myself. And that's something I just kind of need right now. So let's, think of like a non-negotiable thing right now that you want to keep for yourself through the holidays to keep at least a little bit of structure in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I think that's a great thing to consider and to think about. And also, I will add, if you miss a day,
Oh,
be
yeah.
okay with that.
That's
Practice some
okay too.
self-compassion and be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up too much.
That's for sure.
Well, thanks for listening and stay tuned for next week's episode where we will go to our next trail marker, which is interacting and dealing with people and the holidays, including our family and friends. So this should be a good one.
Oh my
So,
goodness. Yeah.
so make sure you listen next week. Have a great week. Take care. Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.